Alright, let's get busy with repairing this holster. Now what happened along this is kind of odd. The way they stitched this liner in is they stitched the liner in separate all the way around, and then they did another separate stitch line along this end to hold the holster together. It does have a welt. Same thing on the back here. Now usually when I stitch a liner on, I try to make it look like one continuous stitch line all the way around, so it doesn't have like a little separate stitch line from where the liner was stitched in and then the holster was stitched together, because this is a lined holster. But I guess that's the difference between factory-made holster. One of the differences anyway between a factory-made holster and one that's handmade. Anyway, the thread that held it along this edge failed. And when I got this holster, there was some broken threads, and I was thinking, you know, I'm going to have to go through there and go in and cut them, each individual one, and then dig it out. But instead what I did, just out of curiosity, is I took my hands and I just give it a little bit of a tug, and it tore apart. Well, and the stitch line did fail, but it is a machine stitch with a lock stitch, so that's what lock stitches will do. If one bit of it breaks, the whole thing will eventually let loose. Same thing on the belt loop here, and it's got the welt. Well, I'm going to go ahead and glue this holster back together before I stitch it. But that's going to be a bit of a pain, because I'm going to have to line up these holes and these holes. Usually what I'll do is I'll glue a holster together, like let me show you a different one here, like this in here. It was all glued together, and then I did the stitching. Let's put that right there. So I'm going to use some stitching pins, stitching needles rather, to help to line up those holes and glue this thing together, which will make it a bit easier to do the stitching when that time comes. I'm also going to rough it up a bit in here, give the glue some tooth. Alright, we'll be back. Alright, what I did is I took my scratch awl and I scratched it up really good there. Put some of this contact cement on it. Allowed that time to tack up, and I put my needles through just to help to locate the holes on this side with the holes on that side. And right now all I got to do is push it together and everything should line up perfectly. Because if it doesn't, that'll be a totally complete pain. Well, this is going to be kind of a difficult stitch anyway, just from the nature of the holster, because I'm going to have to situate this some way that I can get through there and stitch it. Now the thread I'm going to use is a flat braided polyester thread, waxed, and it's 1 mil. The reason I'm going to use flat thread is because on the inside here they didn't groove it before they stitched it. There's no groove, and the stitch is set on the surface, and you can see where the gun scratched it, and that's what broke the stitches. So if I use the flat thread, that should pull into the leather just enough to help to keep that from happening. Now what I'm going to do is hold this up to a light and see if the holes are lining up, and they're looking pretty good. So that shouldn't be too much of a pain to re-stitch. Now I'm going to let this sit overnight and cure up really good, and then we'll see what I do to get it stitched back together. Okay, got this part all stitched back in, and the thread did lay good and flat, so it looks like that'll help prevent it from wearing through again. I got this side all glued up. I got all my needles in there to make sure they line up. I don't know, I might have to go through and open some of these holes with my awl once I get all these out. Well, so I'm gonna go ahead, pull these out, and get to stitching this edge here. And I can see that it's gonna need some touch-ups, but once I get it stitched together, we'll see how much of a touch-up it'll need. I might end up sanding that back a bit, re-dyeing it and re-burnishing it, just to get that edge to look pretty. But like, ooh, I almost stuck. But like I said, we'll find out once I get the stitch back together what I'll need to do to get it to look good. Okay, I'm starting it up at this end because, like I've said in my other videos, when I'm stitching a holster, I try to start my stitching where I think the most stress is going to be, and I believe it's going to be up as the mouth of the holster. And these stitch holes aren't so bad. Let's see, I'm going away from me, so this one wants to go under. No, this one goes on top. I'm thinking just to make it a little bit more decorative. Jeez. Yeah, I pierced it. There you go. That's why I always check. Easy enough fix. There we go. I'm going to cast it over, and of course that means as I start stitching back toward me, I'm going to have to cast under. Man, them some tight holes. See if I can get a nice decorative angle on that stitch. Let's see, where am I? Right there. This one goes on top. And a tight hole. Cast them over and pull that on through. And I'm going to come around the corner here. Doesn't really matter where the second needle goes. What matters is where the second thread goes. Wow, that's tight. I might have to go through with my awl. But since I cast over on the way out, now I want to cast under. Because the angle that it's going to want to sit at. Okay, I'm going to continue on and we'll be back. Okay, I'm about halfway through here. Just thought I'd add this in real quick. I did have to go through in all the holes because they had closed up a bit. That, and they got some of that contact cement in them when I glued it, because usually I'll cement something together. Yeah, I'm getting clumsy there. And then after the glue dries, I'll punch the holes so I don't end up with cement in the holes. But when I glue this together, of course, some of the cement got in the holes, so I had to open those holes up. But it's going along pretty good. And as I pull the stitches tight, it's closing up nicely. Now down at the bottom here, where they did a back stitch, they didn't back stitch into the existing holes. It looks like they just reversed the machine for a few stitches. And since I'm going to back stitch into the existing holes, I got to figure out which ones are made on the way out and which ones are made on the way back. So I've got to watch out for that. That way, yeah. Also, casting under or casting over, either way, what that does also is it puts a little knot in the middle of the stitch line. So if the stitches ever fail again, if a stitch gets worn through it'll stop at that point. It won't continue on. Just a little extra something. I usually use that on belts because, you know, a belt is generally, you put all your stuff on it. Put your holster, put your knife sheath, pouches, whatever else, and I'll go ahead and I'll cast over or under on a belt. So if the threads do get worn through in the next few decades or so, they won't just pull out. Anyway, I'm going to continue. I got to wiggle that one around. It's still a little bit slim. Can't talk. Still a little bit snug. You know, I am actually working up a bit of a sweat doing this. I never thought of leather stitching as an aerobic activity. Hey, apparently it's a good exercise. Okay, alright, that's that stitch line done there. Got that stitched together nicely. Came out pretty good. And the edge actually closed up pretty good too. Doesn't look like it's going to take much at all. I am going to touch it up a bit. Probably reburnish it and make that edge pretty. Oh, that's going to reburnish nicely. And after that, it's off to the next project. Okay, I got stitching done on this one, and whoopsie. I took and I re-dyed the edge. Well, I touched up the dye on the edge, didn't actually re-dye it. Also, I took and I burnished it a bit and tan coated both the threads on the stitch line on both sides and along the edge just to give it a little bit more durability. Gave it a quick going over just to get a little bit better looking. Leave that to dry for a little bit. And now it's off to the next project, and we'll see you there.